Free agency has been a whirlwind, and the deals for defensive players have been coming fast and furious this week. How do the signings affect your IDP fantasy teams? Which players saw their stocks rise and whose value took a hit? That and more on the IDP After Show.
This is the IDP After Show.
Jace Abbey here with special guest Justin Varnes of Fantasy Points to take you through everything you need to know about the opening days of NFL free agency. Justin, a big welcome to you, my friend. How are things?
Things are well, Jace. Thanks for having me on. Hey, listen, I haven't had internet for the last 48 hours, but I'm sure nothing major has happened, right?
Yeah, it's been so quiet. You've missed nothing. No, quite the opposite. It's been.
I can't wait to watch
a full-time job.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch my Seahawks next year with Geno Smith throw into DK Metcalf. I'm really excited about that. Sure, nothing's changed about that.
Oh, it's been so difficult to keep up with everything. Honestly, within minutes of looking at one free agent signing or one guy who's re-signed, somebody else has re-signed, somebody else has signed. It's been absolute mayhem. But we're recording this on day 2 of free agency now. So we already know the landing spots for a lot of the big name guys. So we're pretty confident in our evaluation of how these guys will perform on their new teams, and crucially, whether we should be buying, selling, or holding them. So without further ado, Justin, are you ready to kick things off by looking at the linebacker group?
Let's do it.
Okay. So I've grouped together here Dre Greenlaw, Robert Spillane, and Cody Barton. Greenlaw's gone to the Broncos, obviously. Spillane's gone to the Patriots, and Barton to the Titans. Now, here's my thoughts on this. Spillane was a beast for the Raiders last year, and I don't mind his new landing spot now that Tyrel Williams has joined Vrabel as the new DC. But I think Greenlaw is the better player, and although Vance Joseph didn't use 2 full-time guys last year, I wouldn't be surprised if both Greenlaw and Singleton weren't playing every down for the Broncos this year. And I think Barton will be relevant this year alongside Murray, or maybe slightly behind Murray in snaps, because, as mediocre as Kenneth Murray is, and I've made no secret about my hatred for Kenneth Murray as a player, not as a person, I will add. I don't think Barton's really that much better. So, yeah, for me, I'd buy Greenlaw, I'd hold Spillane, and I'd sell Barton. But really, I think, to be honest, the buy window for Greenlaw and the sell window for Barton was midway through last year.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously we're counting on Greenlaw's Achilles, literally snapping back. But in terms of a buy, he's got to have he did have the lowest value until now. He's got a new landing spot. But to me, he's going to be the guy who has the most upside, and that's really kind of what you want to invest in. I am not nuts about Spillane or Barton. Honestly, I would sell both of them if I could. If I had to hold one, it probably actually would be Barton. And this is probably just PTSD from Patriots linebackers of the past. But as soon as anyone goes to the Patriots, and look, I understand Bill Belichick, he can't hurt me anymore. He's coaching college, but I still just get the twitches every time a really good player goes to the Patriots. So I'm gonna hold Barton and actually sell Spillane, and I'm gonna buy on Greenlaw.
Interesting. Yeah, I like your rationale, even though we've kind of got different outcomes, but.
There's no rationale. You said rationale. There's nothing rational about me wanting to avoid the Patriots. This is a problem I have. I'm just admitting on I was going to say national television, but this is much bigger than that I have a problem, me and the Patriots. So don't listen to me. But if it does come true, then you could say I was the one who brought it forth.
Yeah, I hear you. You're too modest. I'm kind of hoping that, like I say, those days of dividing time between many players is behind us now that there's a new regime there. But you might be right. It might be the safe option to avoid that altogether if we can. Let's move swiftly on to our next group of linebackers then. Deablo signs with the Falcons. Akeem Davis-Gaither moves to the Cards. And Oren Burks is now with the Bengals. I think there's a lot to think about here. I've got question marks over each of these guys. Deablo, for me, looks like he's replacing Landman, and Landman is a free agent now, which leaves them with what? Caden Ellis, and if he's healthy, Troy Anderson. For me, Deablo hasn't really progressed as a player at all, and while the Cardinals gave him pretty good money, considering he hasn't progressed in those 4 years, I have my reservations because their new DC was promoted in-house. I forget his name. So I guess I'd still be a little bit worried that they won't give him a full-time role. ADG, as far as he's concerned, Kaiser White, Chris Barnes are likely headed elsewhere. So his competition looks like it might be Matt Wilson. I know Matt Wilson's got his fans. I'm not necessarily one of them. I know he had some bright spots last year, but he really had some lows too. Owen Papo doesn't really change things for me. I think ADG will be relevant in those leagues that start 3 linebackers, and he might even become a full-time guy if things fall in the right way for him. And what does that leave? Well, Burks. I know he played well in Dean's absence, Nakobe Dean there, and but if or until Pratt is cut, which is a possibility given that it would save them some money, it's hard to imagine anything more than a split role for Burks there. I wouldn't be surprised if he did become, as I say, a full-time or near full-time guy if Pratt leaves, but it's risky, I think, to invest too much in him hoping for that. So right now, I'd probably buy ADG. I'd probably hold Burks, and I'd sell Deablo because I think his value could be at its highest. It is certainly higher than these other two in most people's eyes, if for no other reason than he's got that cool name.
Yeah. Well, this is no fun because I 100% agree on these. To me, the buy window is just because this is all these are like second tier linebackers we're talking here. To me, I look at talent because sometimes if you see a player with a lot of talent, it could be a bad fit scheme wise. We've seen that a ton where you've seen a guy go to a different team. They've got a better use for him, and then he blows up, right? It could be just a change of scenery. Sometimes players, when they get traded or get on a new team, they get their stuff together. So I really look at talent. And to me, of the 3 of these, ADG has the highest ceiling. He definitely has gaps in his game, which is obviously why he hasn't really done what we all hoped he would do. But I think he's got the highest ceiling. So I'm with you. And Deablo, I agree. He's basically. I think the Raiders quickly figured out after a hot start that Deablo doesn't have what it takes to be a 3-down linebacker. And so I don't really see that being him like owning a 100% role for the Falcons either. So I'm with you on this. ADG is the guy I want here. And I'll hang on to Burks just to see if Pratt ends up leaving and that turns into something. Remember, the Bengals were a heavy man defense, though, and that really can pull away tackles from linebackers. So I'm hoping he gets a higher snap count, but also, I don't see a huge ceiling for Burks.
I hear you. So I've also included a trio of players who are currently free agents. Now, bear in mind, we are recording this on day 2 of free agency, and by the time this drops tomorrow, this might very well be outdated. But Eric Kendricks, Denzel Perryman, and Tyrel Dodson, Justin. I think it's almost a bit silly to include guys who are still free agents because, as we know, the landing spot plays such a big role in determining what we view these guys as, how we view these guys, what we project them to do. But I'm kind of putting this one to you as a sneaky segue into asking you a question which you kind of answered a moment ago there, which is how much you weigh up talent over landing spot for linebackers specifically. Because for me, there's a clear order really in terms of ability between these 3 guys.
Yeah, I think 3 or 4 years ago, it would, I don't think talent would have mattered as much at the linebacker position. We've seen plenty of just solid or average linebackers who they can stick in the middle of a defense and they'll play every snap and they'll get 100 to 130 tackles. But I think those days are gone. I think defensive coordinators are continuing to tweak their linebacker roles. So I think talent does matter here. But then we got a couple guys here where age is really starting to matter. So for me, Denzel Perryman is going to be the odd man out. I don't think he has a high ceiling talent wise. I kind of never thought that. I think of all the players, since he doesn't have the highest talent and he's starting to get up there in age, to me, he's the one guy I'm not even remotely thinking about keeping. Kendricks, I think, which is supremely talented. We've seen it over and over and over again. He's got age creeping up on him. He's it's hard to imagine that Eric Kendricks isn't playing for somebody next year. The interesting one for me is a much younger player in Tyrel Dodson, who I think ended up not being a great fit for the Dolphins. I wouldn't be surprised. So for me, I'm probably going to buy Tyrel Dodson in Dynasty, just because I think he's got the freshest legs, if you will. So he's going to eventually get you more snaps than the other two. But I don't know if you see it that way. How do you see it, Chase?
Yeah, I see it exactly the same way, and it's because of the exact same reasons you pointed out there. Perryman, I'm going to get a reputation for hating on any Chargers, as a Chargers fan, any ex-Chargers linebackers, but I've seen plenty of the likes of Perryman, and I don't think there's all that to him. He obviously had that one massive year for the Raiders, but outside of that, I was talking about him on a show many months ago, and I'm surprised I can even remember this, but I don't think he had more than 600 snaps in any season, and it's not... Right. As I said at the time, not just about health in his case. It is a big part, but it's not only about that point. So, yeah, Perryman is my sell. I think he needs a lot of things to go his way to land a starting gig, I think, this year. Dodson and Kendricks, I actually think Kendricks is the better player currently, but like you said, Dodson has room to grow. I can imagine Kendricks starting for a team. It'd be surprising, actually, if he didn't, but Dodson, yeah, by the end of the season, if he finds a home and a few things fall his way, then yeah, he could be the better value. And crucially, I think, when we talk about perceived value, I think a lot of people would perceive Kendricks as being much more valuable than Dodson. And so, again, for that reason, it's worth buying Dodson at his lowest, not at his lowest perhaps, but at a low point.
Yeah, you mentioned something earlier. It was kind of tongue in cheek about the Divine Deablo, like the value of the name, right? But this particularly holds true when it comes to veterans. Denzel Perryman has a name. Obviously because he's been around the league long enough and whatnot. So he's a great sell. Anyone who could pick up Denzel Perryman because they may think, oh yeah, look at all the tackles he's accumulated. It's perfect time to sell him. Tyrel Dodson, you might even have people in your league who don't even know who that is. It's a great opportunity to. I'd love to trade those two. If I had Perryman, I'd love to trade him for Dodson.
Oh yeah, I like the sound of that. I don't know how many takers you'd get. It really depends on the kind of leagues we're talking about.
Right.
And it's worth bringing up because, there's going to be people playing in all sorts of leagues out there. Some people might be new to IDP and be able to take advantage of some less knowledgeable managers in their league, whereas others might be playing in leagues full of, industry experts and IDP experts and really struggle to get any value for these guys because we all think quite similarly when it gets to that point. But yeah, I love you making that point, and it's one I would certainly echo. Now then, we're on to the edge group, Justin. So Josh Sweat, now with the Cardinals. Chase Young stays with the Saints. Harold Landry moves over to the Patriots. I think Sweat is the best of these edges, followed by Young and then Landry. But my buy, sell, hold is less about talent or a landing spot, and more about, again, in this case, what I think their perceived value would be to others. And I think you could trade Sweat for quite a tasty package right now, primarily because he finished the year on such a high, right? But also because he's, the only above average edge the Cardinals seem to have had in what seems like forever. Now, he's my buy for that reason. Landry is a curious one for me because I think it was John Macri pointed out in his tweet following the move to the Pats. He's been an underachiever for most of his career. Now that's Landry, not John himself, right? So yeah, Landry's been an underachiever. Considering his pressure rate, his win rate, his actual sack numbers are really nice. The tackle numbers have always been quite good too. For that reason, I'm really intrigued to see how he does with the Patriots. With that said, he's still my sell because I'm not super confident that he can maintain that level of production. And yeah, Young and Landry are quite close in my estimations as players, but I think Young, similar situation to that which we were just talking about with Dodson and Kendricks maybe. I think Young has a slightly better chance of producing in 2025 and getting stronger, whereas Landry, I'm not so sure. So for that reason, Young is my hold.
Just give me a second. I'm going to finish this tweet where it says Jace Abbey called John Macri an underachiever, quote unquote. Okay, good. So I've got kind of a slightly different take on this. The most interesting one here for me is actually Chase Young because The Saints went out and got him, and we started to see some progress. Remember, obviously, he first round pick blew up with the Commanders, and then injury and playing off script, and all hell broke loose for him. He kind of got a fresh start with the Saints. So we started to see some of that talent show up, and now the Saints say, you know what? We're going to lock this in. So to me, to see the coaching staff say we want to continue to invest in that was a little bit of an uptick, because again, in terms of just talent, like, it's crazy high. So for me, my buy is Chase Young. My hope is that him not switching teams and people remembering the disappointment that Chase Young had slipped into. This is a chance to buy Chase Young. My sell is actually going to be Josh Sweat, because he did come off such a hot streak. He's going to a new team. I do think he's going to do well on the Cardinals. When I say sell, like you were saying earlier, when I say sell, I don't mean it's because I don't think he's going to play well. I just think his perceived value to me is probably the highest of this bunch. And then my hold would be Harold Landry, which I'm not at all excited about. To me, Landry is a lot like John Macri in that he's an underachiever. I totally get that, Jace. I'm following you totally on this. But I've never been excited about Harold Landry. I've never been excited about having him on any of my teams. And did I mention my love of the Patriots? So he's going to be my hold, blanket on the word, but reluctant. My reluctant hold will be Harold Landry.
All right. It's good to have differences. It's good to see different explanations for why we arrived at different conclusions. And this is what people tune in for, right? So keep it coming. Edge rushers: Dayo Odeyingbo, Malcolm Koonce, and Haason Reddick. Odeyingbo goes to the Bears. Koonce stays with the Raiders, and Reddick moves to the Bucks. Now, this one I've got a pretty simple explanation for, really. I think Koonce is the player to buy. He looked really good in 2023. I think people might have forgotten how good he looked in 2023 because he missed all of last year. And for that reason, I think you can get him at a decent value. So, as I say, he's my buy. I would sell Odeyingbo because he's probably the hottest name of those three on the back of getting that massive new deal. And truthfully, I just don't think he's all that special. I know you had a high sack. He had those high sack numbers, I guess, 2 years ago, but last year wasn't quite as good. So I don't think he's all that. I don't think he's actually worth the money that he got given. And I'd hold Reddick because, although he looked pretty crappy when he did play last year, he's only 30, and I think he'll do a lot better now that he's left New York. We know who he is. Really wouldn't be surprised to see a bit of a bounce back year from him.
Yeah, another boring session here, because that's exactly how I feel about all those. It kind of, it's a little different, but we were talking about Chase Young, about the Saints going like, oh no, we've got something here. Let's and this is our chance to let him go, and we're actively keeping him. Same thing with Koonce. Like, I think the Raiders know what they have, and you're exactly right. Like, his value won't get any lower, just having all that time missed. I agree about Dayo. I mean, obviously the Bears are rebuilding there, which is great. They're getting Grady Jarrett and all that, but just I just don't see enough playing time plus production there for me. And Haason Reddick. I mean, he's clearly got it. I mean, he clearly flashed it. To me, you have to wash away last year just for all. I mean, you can't imagine a worse season for a guy to go through, to essentially be quote unquote healthy. And, and also you're likely to get, if you got a dynasty owner who has Reddick, they might be absolutely just over the moon frustrated with this guy. So it's a good chance to either try and get him, or if you've got him, hold on to him and don't let someone else throw you some ridiculous trade offer. So yeah, I think we're on the same page for that group.
Yeah, and as much as we would like to erase what we saw from Reddick last year, imagine how much he wants to to dial back to where he was 12 months ago, because he's missed out on the Super Bowl, missed out on a huge chunk of money. But yeah, all's well that ends well, I hope. And yeah, I think he'll kind of bounce back this year. So good to hear we're in agreement on that one. And let's move on to our last group of edge rushers then. So Joseph Ossai, he remains with the Bengals. Michael Hoecht got quite a bit of money for the Bills, and Patrick Jones somehow got even more, I think, in terms of annual value with the Panthers. Now, here's my thinking. I'd buy Ossai because I think he finished the year well, 5 sacks in the last 7 games. Still have some reservations, I think, about his chances of kind of, pushing on and becoming a consistently productive guy. But I wouldn't be massively surprised if that happened. He's flashed at times, right, as I say, especially towards the end of the year. I'd sell Jones in a heartbeat. 7 sacks on 24 pressures is not the ratio that excites me, Justin. And, the landing spot is nice. I've seen nothing to suggest he'll kind of become that guy. Some people think he will. Also, I think somebody else in these IDP leagues will look at those 7 sacks and be willing to give me something for him, or more than I think he's actually worth anyway. And that's the crucial takeaway, really. And I guess that leaves me holding Hoecht. I'm not a huge fan, but he got the longest deal of these 3, and there's no easy out until I think it's 2027. So that alone tells me they really wanted him and that they intend to play him a bunch.
Yeah, I'm with you. I really do like Ossai, and talk about playing time. I mean, he's going to slot right into that role, right? I mean, he's should slot right into that left defensive end role, and immediately have playing time. And I think he does have a lot of talent in there. I'm with you on Patrick Jones, and also just like he's the opposite, right? He's got a lot of traffic. So I'm not exactly sure he's going to get a ton of playing time. I think Ossai has the clearest path to playing time, which I like looking at. And I'm with you. The Bills' philosophy on defensive linemen has shifted over the last couple of years, where they used to just stockpile them and then rotate them a lot, Then last year, they kind of thinned out their defensive line and had guys playing a lot more snaps. But it looks, at least in what these moves are, they still have Epinesa, they still have Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Greg Russo. So Hoecht is he's a guy who at least right now, doesn't have a ton of playing time in front of him, but his value is also incredibly low. So why not grab him? Obviously, if any of those players goes down, he's going to move in. And Oliver starting to tick up with age. So is Jordan Phillips. He's got some opportunities, particularly on passing downs. And he's with the Bills, which means if they can get up to some leads, they're going to get into some more of their NASCAR or speed packages. We could actually see some uptick here from him. I think he does have some nice upside.
Yeah, and you mentioned there about it's a point I forgot to pick up on, the Ossai sliding into that starting role. Were you surprised to see Sam Hubbard retire?
I wasn't, because last year he was all banged up. He had I feel like it was a neck issue, or I believe it was a neck issue or a leg issue. But basically all of 2023, he basically played at 80% and kind of just fought through that. And then he got nicked up a whole bunch last year and just did not look like the same player. I mean, Sam Hubbard, used to lead the league in tackles for defensive linemen. I mean, he was a bruiser. And the last 2 years, we have not seen the same player, and it's clearly injury related. So it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I would have liked to seen him play longer, but when I saw that come in my mind, you make these things up in your head, but in my mind, I just pictured him being like, my body's shot and I can't do this anymore. And I'm tired of playing hurt and I'm not producing anymore anyway. So that's just kind of what I pictured.
Yeah, absolutely. And as sad as it is to see his career end in this way, we've got to give props to him for being that guy for so long. And if there is, a positive to take from this, and at risk of sounding insensitive, it is that we'll get to see Ossai now. But as I say, the main takeaway there is really, it's sad to see Hubbard leaving this way, but I'm sure he's got plenty of good memories, and he'll be around the facility a lot, or around his teammates a lot at least. So, yeah.
I am proud to announce that FastDraft now has an all-defense game called D-Up. That's right, fans of IDP finally have a real money best ball game that they can play. No more manually setting up leagues every time you want to do a draft. No. Now you can play for $10,000, $2,000 to first. Could draft up to 30 teams, all defense. And the best part, balanced scoring, tackles for loss, pass breakups. It all factors in. Just draft 6 defensive players, top 4 into your lineup every week. It's that easy. It's so easy that this isn't just for IDP people. If you love the NFL, then you'll love this game. And for the first time with FastDraft, you can sweat both sides of the ball on Sunday. So use your host promo code to get a $25 deposit match, and you'll love this D-Up contest because it's about time we got one.
All right, so that gives us an opportunity to move on to our DT group. And here we have Milton Williams with the Patriots. Who could have predicted the size of the deal that he got, until about the midway point of last year? Jonathan Allen, who joined the Vikings and now is partnering up with Javon Hargrave. And then Javon Kinlaw, who is now with the Commanders. This, Justin, is another situation where my buy, sell, and holds do not align with the order of ability that I think these players have. Because I think, again, what other people's perceptions and values will be with these guys kind of forces my hand a little bit. I would buy Allen because he had a down year. He had that injury. I think was it a pectoral or something similar. I hope that I would be able to find at least one manager who was willing to cut ties with him at a discount based on what they saw last year. And if I'm completely honest with you, I mean, we play fantasy for fun, but there's more to it than that. I'm really excited about the idea of what he can do in Minnesota with, as I said before, Javon Hargrave, AVG, Jonathan Grenard, and Dallas Turner. That just sounds frightening, and I can't wait to see it. I'd love to have a piece of that. So yeah, that also factored into why I want to buy Allen. I would sell Williams. Look, he was on fire towards the end of last year. Not denying that whatsoever. Really think he could push on and perform at a similar level for the entirety of this year. But everyone knows about him now. Kind of similar to Josh Sweat we're talking about earlier on. These guys who had deep playoff runs, who performed well into the playoffs and into the Super Bowl. Everyone knows about them. Their values kind of go up in people's estimations. It's that familiarity level, isn't it, that people have with these names, with these players as impact guys. So it would still take, I will say, a pretty sweet deal for me to give him up. I think there is a case to be made for holding him. But instead, I've chosen to hold Kinlaw. And not because I think he's going to light it up in Washington, more because I just don't think I would get a huge return in trying to sell him. Maybe it's just me. I see the improvement in recent years. But has he got to a level where we can really see him breaking out and becoming a really, really useful DT in those DT premium leagues that we're in? I'm not sure. But I will say the Commanders seem to think so, considering they gave him $30 million guaranteed.
Yeah, I'm with you. To me, Allen is the most volatile here, right? I mean, that's such a stacked line there for the Vikings. So my instinct is to buy Allen, but because he's the most volatile, I ended up landing on hold just because, he could tear it up there. He could also just find himself in a good bit of a rotation. Remember that Commanders defensive line, the way it was set up, both of those defensive tackles ended up amassing most of the tackles. And I don't think we're going to quite see that in Minnesota. So he's my hold. I'm definitely buying Javon Kinlaw. I think he's, he, to me, I don't know if he's necessarily got more upside than Allen, but he's going to be my buy. And then, Milton Williams went to the Patriots. So you should just already know, everyone, that's just an immediate sell to me.
I hear you. Okay, right. Let's go on to these safeties then. Cam Bynum, now with the Colts. Tre'von Moehrig, who has joined the Panthers, and Javon Holland, who signed today with the Giants. Now, this one I struggled with a little bit, to be honest with you, Justin. Largely because, obviously, Lou Anarumo in as the new DC in Indy. Will he bring over the same scheme the Bengals had? If so, will Cross adopt that sort of box role while Bynum bends up as more the deep safety? I've got some concerns, I guess, that both Bynum and Cross may suffer, as none of the Bengals safeties were super productive under Anarumo, and Yeah, I say that lightly because there's so much else that goes into this by way of personnel at other positions as well, right? So, but yeah, the bigger worry for me might be, if I'm honest, how many tackles are left after Franklin's had his fill. So for that reason, I toy with this one quite a long time, and it was all about Bynum. Where do I put Bynum? And that influences what I do with the other two. In the end, settled on buying Holland, selling Moehrig, and holding Bynum, but it was close.
I'm exactly with you. The one that jumped off the page to me here is Holland. I think he's going to a productive role. I'm actually excited to see him get out of that, like Vic Fangio style or Patriot style defense. I think this is going to be a good move for him. Obviously the Vikings were finding unique ways to use all three of their safeties. The fact that they realized that they didn't realize they needed to make a move from Bynum, but somebody's got to get cut basically. And so to me, I'm with you. I actually feel like Bynum is, because remember 2 years ago, he had massive stats. And I spent all last season talking about how that was mainly luck. The Vikings rotated all three of their safeties almost evenly. And so it just so happened that the way that the dice rolled out, Bynum was this heavy producer 2 years ago. Last year, I had a huge bet on him to fall under his tackle prop based on that, and that's exactly what happened. But I don't think it was a matter of his skill level. So I'm saying this to say, if you're looking at his stats from 2 years ago to last year, you're going to see a pretty big drop off. But I don't think it was. And then all of a sudden now he's on a new team. So your instinct here might be to sell Bynum because it looks like he's on the decline. But I don't think that's the case. I think he got incredibly lucky 2 years ago. I think he had a really good season last year, but nobody can kind of repeat that, particularly in the Vikings defense. My issue here is clearly they're moving on from the single high safety defense that they ran last year in Indy. And we know that Nick Cross is not good deep, just as you were saying, right? So Bynum can play anywhere. So does that mean by default he plays deep often, or do they start running a lot more too high and he just kind of falls into a nice medium role where he's putting up, 4 to 7 tackles a game? So he's my hold. And yeah, Moehrig, he's got a ton of ability. I talk about somebody who I think will work best deep. I think all three of these guys can play deep, right? But I just think for the Panthers, I could see Moehrig ending up between the three of these, getting the most of the time at the back of the defense. I'm actually with you. I'm holding Bynum, buying Holland, selling Moehrig. But honestly, I'd want to hold Moehrig and Bynum together if I could. I had a hard time letting Moehrig go, for whatever that's worth.
No, yeah, I can understand the thought process there. With Moehrig, I'm kind of looking at not just last year, I guess, but how well he did for years prior to that, and he was a bit of a letdown in terms of a tackle producer, and I'm just worried, I guess, that we don't have this body of work to lean on, and
right, and that was kind of the. And sorry, but that was kind of my tiebreaker too. I know he played a lot of deep safety, and he kind of was a little bit more of a natural fit as a deep safety a couple of years ago. They obviously moved him around more last year, but so the question is, do the Panthers just put him deep again, and we get to see that 2022 kind of production, which is not what we want to see.
Yeah, it's a tough one, this one, isn't it? It's a fun one. It's not always the big name players that make it difficult for us. It's some of these guys who are just closer, I think, in what we perceive their value to be that make life hard for us, right? So, Let's then move on to another safety group. Talanoa Hufanga has joined the Broncos. Jeremy Chin moves over to the Raiders. And Andre Cisco is now with the Jets. This one was a bit clearer cut for me, Justin. I really like Chin's landing spot, especially with the aforementioned Moehrig and now Robert Spillane out of the picture as well. That's a lot of tackles from last year that someone's going to have to pick up. I think Chin stands a really good chance of being the guy to absorb a lot of that production. He, I think, is a natural fit for the role vacated by Moehrig. I think he has another good year this year, and assuming people don't overvalue him, he would be my buy. Now, there is that risk, isn't there, that people would overvalue him after a productive year last year. So this is one where I'd want to kind of like test the waters a little bit. I would hold of the remaining two Hufanga, as I think he will start alongside Brandon Jones. I don't think who's the other guy there? PJ Locke can hold off a healthy Hufanga. And I don't think anyone would buy him even if I wanted to sell him anyway, right? So that leaves me with, I guess, selling Cisco. And I guess you could apply a similar rationale to that which I applied to Hufanga. Who's going to give you much for Cisco really at this point? But we got to choose somebody. That's the way I've chosen to go.
Yeah, I really, really still believe in Jeremy Chin. I think safeties in particular can get there's like you get safeties. This is really the case for a lot of positions, but particular for safeties, you can get these talented players who have strengths and weaknesses in certain areas. But then you've got a defensive coordinator whose job it is to move these chess pieces around and say, yeah, I mean, I'd love to play this guy in the box, but I can't leave so-and-so deep, or we have to play more two-man, too high. And so we've seen Jeremy Chin's production go up and down, but I just really, we were talking earlier with the defense or the linebackers, I just really believe in that talent. And so I'm going to hang on. He's going to be the guy I'm trying to collect as much as possible here. And I agree. I believe that he has the clearest path to production of these three. Hufanga, I wrestled with this one too. I flipped from wanting to buy him based on like how it kind of like fell off for him, and then immediately wanting to just go ahead and sell him for whatever value he's got left. And so that settled in on a hold for me. I hate to say, I want no part of Andre Cisco. I've seen him play enough. So I'm selling him whatever shares I have left of Andre Cisco. I have some, and this is terrible. I'm supposed to be more objective than this, but I have multiple plays I can picture with the Jaguars watching Andre Cisco and thinking like, oh God, this is like, there's no way he's sticking around. And shockingly, he didn't stick around. So if the Jaguars are going to keep you as much as they need talent, I'm sure not going to keep you either.
It makes perfect sense. We don't need to be objective. Just be honest. These big takes are fun. This is what makes this stuff fun. All right, so let's move on to a cornerback group now. Byron Murphy remains with the Vikings. Carlton Davis joins the Patriots. A lot of Patriots being mentioned tonight for you, Justin. And Charvarius Ward now with the Colts. For me, so little to choose between these guys. If I'm truthful, if I'm completely honest, I would be looking to sell all three of these guys. Murphy, because he produced so well last year and played well last year, in fairness. Davis and Ward, because they've got big new contracts, and hopefully somebody in an IDP league that I'm in will look at these big new contracts and be like, oh, yeah, that guy's worth something. I'd be looking to sell all three, but that's not the game we're playing here, right? So for the reason I mentioned a moment ago with Murphy, he had the most productive year. I can't remember his tackle rate, but it was really healthy for a corner. He's the only one of the three, I think, that played much in the slot. I think he has the most value, but that's the reason why I'm looking to sell him. And part of that is because he's a cornerback. Now, it does give us that familiarity level, so I understand that people were wanting to hold on to him in the hope that he can kind of replicate that production from last year, but we know that corners struggle to do that. So I'd be looking to sell Murphy at his highest, which is right now. I guess of these three, Ward has the bigger name of the remaining two, probably because of his tackle production prior to last year. Obviously, he missed a few games last year. So he makes sense, I think, to hold rather than buy. Whereas Davis, has been a good corner. He's done well in terms of earning what he's now earning, but he's not very well known. I would probably take a gamble on and hope that the change of scenery means that he'll be more productive, at least in the tackle department. And for that reason, I'd probably be looking to buy him because he's worth less. Not worthless, but worth less.
Well, you stole my general line on this, which is that I'm also this way mostly actually with safeties, but absolutely for cornerbacks. I'm selling any remotely valuable piece I have because I just feel like the numbers say to get a really valuable cornerback is, it's literally just reaching your hand into a jar and hoping you pull out a good one. Just because, number one, that's just part of how it is to play cornerback in terms of how many tackles you might get, and obviously defensive coordinators are tending to start tinkering with the backside of their defense before they start tinkering with the front side. So they're just highly volatile. I do an article every year where I always like to highlight which of the top 10 cornerbacks last year or 2 years ago made it into the top 10 the year before. And it's usually only 1 or 2 a year. So all the more reason you want to sell any cornerback you can. But that's not the game here. So I'm mostly with you. The guy I'm definitely selling, absolutely, is Charvarius Ward, because in the 49ers defensive scheme, he played a heavy role in their in run defense. He, 2 years ago, I think he had like 80 something, 90 something tackles, right? Last year, he obviously only played part of the year. I think he had, it was 57 tackles, right? So Charvarius Ward is a name of a cornerback who has amassed a good amount of tackles, and that looks sexy, but he's now moving to a different defense. We don't know if he's going to be as heavily involved in the run game. So for me, he's definitely the guy I think who might have the highest perceived value, right below Byron Murphy. I think Byron Murphy is another guy I would consider selling. I'd sell all 3 of these, right? But here's the one, for believe it or not, I'm actually going to buy Carlton Davis for the Patriots. He's going to be the only Patriot I'll ever actually buy, and I'm going to hold Byron Murphy. Because I do think Murphy got a little bit lucky last year, but I like the fact that the Vikings said yes, we like what he's going to do. Let's not tinker with that. I've always been a fan of Carlton Davis. I think he's got some good ball skills, which I think is always nice to have. And the Patriots usually run a pretty aggressive defense. So I'm going to sell Charvarius Ward, buy Carlton Davis, and hold Byron Murphy.
Okay. Interesting stuff. And I like your explanation. That then brings us to the end of the episode. But before we move on and wrap things up, there have been a couple of other guys who have moved in free agency today, and I'm interested in discussing these guys. So we talked earlier on about Javon Hargrave. He wasn't involved in our trio of buy, sell, hold options earlier on when we were talking about DTs. But my view on him, Justin, is that if I could get him at the right price, I would be looking to buy him right now. Again, largely for the same reasons I offered for Jonathan Allen. Yeah, he hasn't been doing as well lately for our IDP leagues, but he isn't that old, and this team, this line could be something special. So I'm kind of in on him, but it depends on what someone would want.
No, I am. I mean, I really think, I'm one of those that believes that unless it's a really, really deep line, like we've talked about with the Buffalo Bills, for a while there, they were running, they had 8 guys they were rotating in between, keeping everybody fresh, which is great, which is incredibly frustrating if you use them in your fantasy teams. But Hargrave, to me, on a team like the Vikings, where you want talent around your talented players, it frees them up to get more single teams. It frees them up to not have to, be the sole bearer of sacks and tackles. So I actually am really excited about this Hargrave move. So I'm definitely buying him as often as I can. Remember, he's coming back from injury.
Yeah, for sure. And the other guy I wanted to just touch on briefly, again, didn't feature in our trio of players because he was signed so close to recording time, but Gardner-Johnson out of the Eagles moving to the Texans. This, for me, Justin, I appreciate his talent. I appreciate what he did for the Eagles in helping them with that Super Bowl run. But I feel like unless I'm in a league that really skews scoring toward big plays, his interceptions predominantly, maybe passes defensed, I wouldn't be scared about trading away someone like Gardner-Johnson.
Yeah, I think he's actually going to have a pretty solid season in Houston, but we're talking about value or perceived value, right?
Yep.
And anybody coming off a Super Bowl team, he's obviously another. So he's a Super Bowl champion, right? I mean, he's got all of this cachet around his name and his toughness and all that sort of stuff. This is all stuff that can help you sweeten the deal. And as I said before, my philosophy is selling all of my cornerbacks if possible, and it's selling most of my safeties as possible. So all the more reason for me and also he's a guy that, I mean, they can play him in a bunch of different capacities. And so, now obviously they don't really have a lot of talent there in their safety room. They've got some veterans like Jimmy Ward, MJ Stewart. They got Kalen Bullock, so he's likely going to slot in as like a, split safety or a strong safety. But how does he work in the slot? Because he can work in the slot. They also have Jalen Petre there. So I'm sure he's going to start, but to me, how he's used is not clear. And he's just got such high value right now in terms of his name and in terms of how well he how well his team did last year. To me, he's a guy I'm definitely going to sell just based on that, not because I think he's going to have a bad season.
Yeah, and it's that versatility which doesn't always work in these players' favors in these early stages before we get an appreciation for how they're going to be used. Because he could be a free safety, he could be a slot guy, he could. He's played in the box at times for some of these teams, almost
right.
predominantly. That makes it a scary situation at this point in the year if you're looking to shift him or to buy him, I think. And as I say, the overriding factor for me is really the name value, the fact that he, like the two other guys I mentioned earlier in this episode, were so vital in that Eagles Super Bowl run that everyone knows about them, and there's going to be somebody out there that may be interested in picking them up. So I don't want to label the point, but he certainly falls into that category, and I'd be remiss not to mention it. So,
yeah, no, that was a good one. The only thing I want to add, this isn't really necessary for Gardner-Johnson, but in terms of just philosophy for selling some of your cornerbacks in particular, but also some of your safeties, anytime I've got a cornerback or a safety who puts up 3 or more interceptions in a year, I'm selling that guy, because somebody out there is going to look at an interception count and think, ooh, I want all those big plays, even though we all should know at this point that that's just incredibly volatile and incredibly luck-based. So, but if we haven't mentioned some guys here, look for anybody who's got 3+ interceptions on a year and sell them now, because it's likely not coming back.
Yeah, and I do agree with you. Although I did get my fingers burnt in a couple of leagues last year when I sold. Who are the two? Xavier McKinney and Kirby Joseph.
Oh, right. Joseph.
I sold.
Speaking of luck, right? Come on, it's just not going to happen again.
Yeah, and ultimately, your point was proven correct. These guys didn't maintain quite the same level all year. Right. I do believe there is this a clearer distinction between people who are playmakers and people who aren't at a safety position and at cornerback. Right. But that said, these guys they are a bit up and down from year to year. And so, yes, while I was a few games too early in getting out from under these two guys, yes, I do totally believe and agree with your point, Justin. So, Justin, now that is a wrap. We gave people a little bit of extra there towards the end to try and take us up to date with, as I say, this frantic free agent period. It's a fun exercise, though, right? I've enjoyed having you on. Thanks, Jace. This has been fun, man. Always easy to just kind of chop up ball with you. So this is a lot of fun. Hopefully, again, one thing I admire about your approach is
you're talking about these players, but you're talking a lot about actual like value, right? Not this guy's better than this guy. And that to me is one of the big mistakes that people make during this time of year is this player A is better than player B. That doesn't necessarily mean player A is the guy you buy and player B is the guy that you sell. I thought you did a great job of displaying that. So a lot of fun, man. Let's do it again soon. And also let's check back in a month and see what the hell this looks like again.
We should do. And we joke about it, but yeah, it's moving fast, right? And a lot of these guys have signed massive contracts, which means that their role is relatively safe. But it only takes, I was looking at the Vikings earlier today and looking at Jonathan Allen, who had just signed, and thinking, yeah, that's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see where Hargrave goes. And then I saw a report saying Hargrave also signed with the Vikings, at which point I'm then like, well, anything's possible. But yes, you're right. We should circle back and review how these things look in the weeks to come, because there are a handful of other names. And it does frustrate me, don't know about you, when we see these reports come out that, like 24 of the top 25 free agents have now been snapped up. Well, not necessarily on the defensive side. These are these combined articles which always rank the defensive guys way lower than they should be. Yeah. There's still some playmakers, still some big names out there that could make a difference. We touched on some of them in the linebacker part of this earlier on, didn't we? With the Eric Kendricks of the world. These guys could come in and upset a situation really fast. So yeah, pay attention to what's going on. And if you can't, then we'll continue to do this and try and help you get up to date. To that point, the IDP show is back next week with Josh, Adam, and Bob recapping free agency. So make sure to tune in for that. Justin, again, I really appreciate you coming on. Tell our listeners, if you will, where they can go to find more of your fantasy wisdom.
You can catch me at fantasypoints.com. I'm one of the IDP analysts over there. And then always on Twitter is probably the easiest way to find me at Down with IDP.
Go and follow Justin. In the meantime, as I mentioned, Josh, Adam, and Bob are back with the free agency recap next week. I'm back the following week looking at, and I'm very excited about this, turning our attention to the draft, looking at the rookie linebackers. So please tune in as always. In the meantime, and in a truly British way, cheerio.
This was the IDP After Show.